Hello and welcome back. This is ProTaleDev. We're in 2022, so brand new development is going to be starting. This is the first official video that I'm recording in 2022. So Turtle Trial that I released the video maybe 2 weeks ago was just something from last year that I just tried to release. I took January off to relax and to re-energize and to get ready for more development this year. So now we're in February, and what we're going to be doing is looking at a brand new project. Immediately kicking off this year, I wanted to get into a project that expands on things that I've learned previously, but last year I wasn't completely happy with Dungeon Farm Tycoon. I felt like there was still so much more that needed to be done, that could have been done, and that I could have experimented with and expand upon, and I really wasn't happy with the 2D aspect of it. It didn't look good enough for me. I didn't like the look of it all that much, and I just felt like it just really underachieved what I wanted its final product to be. And so what I want to do is I want to quickly show off what I've been working on in the last week or so to try and get the game up to scratch and to be better. So essentially this is a new game, but it's built on the previous game of Dungeon Farm Tycoon. So this game is going to be called Dungeon Architect. So the premise for Dungeon Architect is pretty much the same as Dungeon Farm in a way. Essentially you're going to start on an island, you're going to build up the economy, you're going to try and keep it going and then build out your own dungeon. However, it's not going to be the same exactly. There's going to be a lot of new stuff and a lot of differences and a lot of things that really I want to focus on, especially this year. This isn't going to be a project I'm going to run all the way through the year like I did last time. This game is intended to only be a couple of months at best. I just wanted this game to look a lot better and be a lot better than it was in the past year. Because of the massive change that I've done, which is from transferring and converting everything from 2D to 3D environment, the game looks almost like a brand new game. So I figured that this might as well be its own new project. Before I get into this project, I also want to mention that because it's going to be maybe a 2 or 3 months project, after that I plan on starting a new proper project, as well as doing game jams and things. This is just kind of for me to get started, you know, and get warmed up essentially. Another quick thing before we start is that the assets, I've imported some brand new assets, some low polygon assets that I could use in this project, essentially just to help me fill out the gaps in the environment, make it look better quickly. However, some of these assets have been made by me as well in Blender, so there's a bit of a mix. So it's the flat cube environment, so with Tail Monster, and we got Leon Lee for some of the low poly village assets. So, but there's also a lot of assets, like I mentioned, that I've quickly made as well. So first things first, let's bring this out. Let's show you some actual gameplay. So upgrading this from 2D to 3D was really difficult. So to be more accurate, it's actually been over a week. It's actually been about a week and a half, but a lot of that time was converting that 2D to 3D environment was actually really difficult because of how, you know, the movement in 2D and 3D is so different. So I've had to work on the NPCs a lot more, their movement, their adventurers and movement, as well as a lot of the placement being broken. Obviously placement on 2D environments is very different. You're only taking in the X and Y aspects, and that's obviously when you convert that to a 3D environment, you're no longer working on an X and Y, it's more like an X and Z. Now working with those 3 axes was ended up being much more work. However, as you can see, things are running, they're working, we aren't getting any errors, things are actually working pretty well. Immediately there's no changes to the UI, so the UI is the same, everything functions the same way as the Dungeon Farm Tycoon. If you haven't seen it, you should go and check out some of my videos, but everything else is working as it should be. We've got our NPCs spawning here, which are these blocks. The different color indicates the different classes, so whether a villager, a knight, a dragonkin, or a wizard. That's determined here. They're just walking up, spawning on this bridge, which is kind of our new start point, and they'll work their way to a dungeon, which is this guy. We have a house here and we have a shop. Immediately the environment is much nicer, much more prettier. The lighting is, I'm using post-processing, as well as this is the universal render pipeline. With the improved graphics, comes a lot of much nicer environment in general and lighting effects, a lot of better shadows. So we shouldn't have as many lighting issues as we did with the 2D project. I spent hundreds of hours just trying to fix the shadows in the 2D environment. Obviously, trying to cast shadows in a 2D environment is just very difficult in general. You have to use a lot of tricks to get it to work, and it really wasn't the result I wanted. So going to a 3D environment, this was one of the big reasons I wanted to do that, to really make this game shine. You may have noticed just then was I was rotating the screen. So what I'm doing here is I'm rotating the camera on a camera rig, as well as moving around, and I can also zoom in and zoom out. I can zoom all the way out, or I can also zoom all the way in. I've added this in because it's really important to be able to see closer and to be able to click on things easier. But also you can zoom out in case you want to see, you want to travel across like multiple islands, which is something I'm going to talk about in a second. Right now, as you can see, it has just gotten dark. That's now working, and I've updated it to be rather than using the global 2D lighting, which was used, it's now using the directional lighting for 3D environments. So all the lighting has also been changed, as you'd expect. All the colliders on everything had to be changed to be made for a 3D environment. It just took a tremendous amount of time to convert all of that 2D assets to 3D and to get them to all work, especially when it was to do with the placement of this environment. This also means that the mouse is now 3D as well. So instead of a 2D mouse being projected on a camera canvas, and it calculates the X and Y on that canvas based on the screen point, now what it's doing is actually calculating the selection point, the mouse, in the actual environment itself. So it's actually casting a ray directly from the camera. So the camera is set up here, and then there's a laser going straight to this object. That determines where the object is being placed, and this is very important for this 3D environment, being able to click on things and to be able to delete them, which of course does work. If I just show that here, you can see that I can in fact delete, and the effects still work, of course. The next thing I want to talk about is the fact that the navigation has changed. So instead of using A star, which was for 2D, really for 2D games and 2D movement, if I pause this, we're actually using a nav mesh now, which I did use in my game jam with the horror game Passing Rooms. If you know, if you've seen that game, what I worked on, essentially I used nav meshes to have the monster chase you and to calculate its path to try and catch you. Now I've done the same thing but for the NPCs, so they're now following a nav mesh instead. If I just put on this, instead what they're following is, let me just make sure I'm out here, going to scene instead. You can now see where they can travel, and that is the path. So there was two options I could have used with this nav mesh. I'm actually using custom components so that I can really tune it to what I want. And so I've got this surface here set up with all the NPCs on a specific layer, and right now they're using the geometry of physics colliders. With these physics colliders though, all I have to do is have a collider with a specific layer attached to that object, and essentially it can use that to determine the pathing. So as you can see, they're all following this path. They can go up these stairs, they can go on this pier, the docks, and they'll follow these paths all the way to the object they need to go. Once they're in range, they'll get detected, but they do need to be connected, and that's going to be really important later on, and I'll show that in a second when we're playing as well. And so yeah, the pathing is really, really important. It has to be connected to the dungeon, to the objects themselves, in order for this to work. Let's actually zoom in here and show that. So right now we have our dungeon right here, it's placed down, but there's actually a path in this prefab that's been placed down that is connected. For objects to connect their paths, they actually need to be close enough and almost touching for it to work. If I turn on this gizmo here, we're still clicked on the nav mesh so you can see it. You can see where the path is right here, this blue, and it is connected onwards. However, if I quickly turn this off, you can see this is our house. So this is one of our objects in our shop. This is the inn or the bungalow house. and it's currently placed just there. However, it's not actually connected. If I rotate the camera quickly, you can also see that the house has got the path here. It's actually the wrong way round, but that's something I'll fix later. So you've got your path here, and if I turn on this again, you can see that the path isn't connected to this main mesh, even though there is a path there. That is because it's got to be very, very close. If I was to change this path, however, to something that can connect to it, so here we go, if we connect this path to this one, it will touch the path directly. We place this down, and now if I click on this, you can actually see that the path is now connected to this building. Now what's going to happen is these guys will come to this house when they need to. Of course, in our code, they won't go to the house unless they've gone to a shop. Instead, what they'll do is they'll either go to a dungeon and then they'll just leave if there's nothing to buy. So what we need to do is we need to check and see if it's actually connected. At the moment, what I've done is I've just put a command here that debug.log just to see if a path is not reachable. As you can see, while we've been running this, a lot of them have not been able to reach their path. This is just part of the navmesh commands and codes and methods, but essentially they have a way of calculating the path and seeing if it's actually can reach its position. Obviously in this case I'm putting out that it's unreachable, which it is. It can't reach the shop, which is this up here. So this is our shop, this is an armor shop, and they cannot reach it. Oh, here we just got someone who bought it, but what they're doing is they're just heading straight home. We don't want that, obviously, so what we're going to do is we're going to change it. So this is something that I want to be able to do probably the next time I do a video. I'll show this, but what I'm going to work on next is actually rotation on buildings. We need to be able to make it so that the buildings can rotate, and you can just click a button to have them connect to the path. We also need an icon above the building to say that it's not connected to the path. So the easiest way to do that is, if we look at this right here, we have our building. The easiest way to connect it is actually just to rotate it. Make sure it's connected to this. So if we just make sure that's correct, imagine there's just a button that does this for you where you can rotate the building when you've clicked on it, and then we just have this path right here, and again we just need to connect this path, and of course we can do that with this right here. Of course we're the wrong way round. I probably will have a reset button for the camera as well, just to make building easier, but there we go, you can see that it's now connected. If we watch, all of them should now head to the shop, and most likely will just leave. The reason is because they won't go to a house unless their happiness is high enough, and we know for a fact that their happiness is not high enough without food and water, which we don't really have. So if I click on some of these, there we go, we can see that this guy right here, and this proves that the clicking does work, the collisions do work. We can see that he is not happy, his happiness is dropping. Doesn't obviously have any gold yet. If we just hover over this guy, we can now figure out what he's got. His happiness did increase, so he will go to the store. Hopefully he'll buy something which will increase his happiness over a certain amount, which means he'll go to his house. Not guaranteed for all of them though. He's got some gold, so he'll probably buy something, and his experience and things should go up. But of course there's not enough food and water. There we go, he did buy something. Will he leave though? I think his happiness is just under 50%, so he'll leave. He won't stay in the house. What we want to do is we actually want to bring out some food. So as you can see, we've got our grid still. If I zoom out, you can see immediately we've got this grid. It's a little bit too heavy, so I'll probably lower the color. I don't even know if we really need the grid anymore, but what we can do is you can see the icon on our ground here, which is the only thing we can build on. All we have to do is click on here if we've got enough gold, and it will build it. So let's put it, I don't know, let's put it there. So as you can see, it is a bit dark at the moment because it's just gone dark. You can see we're just earning enough sometimes, which is producing some happiness. What we need is more food and water. So right now I've put down some food, a farm, and I've put down a well. This means we're going to be producing water and food. Obviously not enough food considering how many people we've got, and hopefully that'll be enough food now and enough water. So the next thing is that I want the levels to be much more dynamic and much more higher or lower in the level. I want this to be a big thing later on when I add in disasters. And so what I've got here is a little bit of an example. So we've got a path ready set up to go up to here. We have these paths right here. This is something I want players to be able to do, is to build up hills and then be able to set up on multiple islands on different levels. So we got one example right here, and what we can do is I want to build a shop up here. The easiest way for me to do this is to just quickly place down some paths. So let's just do that right now. Should be easy enough. We've got quite a lot of money. I probably will just spawn in some money just to get started. So let's just pause that, bring in some money, and then it'll be easier to show off. Okay, unpause. Now I can show off a lot easier. But once we go up this path, and then maybe put another path there, what we can do is we can add another armor shop. I haven't done the other shops yet, and of course it's the wrong way, so we need to add it in a couple more times to make sure. And as you can see, it should be set up now. If I quickly check the nav mesh, so if I click this, so what I've done is, instead of getting rid of this hill, it wasn't working, and so there's still a few tweaks I need to make. Instead, I've added this staircase to just get up to the second part because it wasn't working, like I mentioned. And so if I quickly turn this on, you can actually see that this one is working. They can navigate all the way to this shop now, and hopefully we will see some people going up there. Oh, as we can see, we've actually got someone. So one person is now heading to the armorer. You can see them actually going to buy something, so you can see that navigation is absolutely working. So what is the big plans for this game? Now, with this more expansive landscape, I'm going to be adding a lot more to the dungeons as well. So the dungeons are going to be layered as well, just as much as this one is. So this one is also this is going to be a much more layered game, a lot more level design, and a lot more fun to build, to be honest. There's going to be a lot more randomization with the position of objects, so like these trees and things are all the same at the moment. We're going to have a lot more randomization. So one of the big problems with the last game was that nighttime is kind of pointless. There wasn't really much to nighttime apart from just showing that everything looks nice. The initial plan was to have monster raids, which is one of the disasters that I initially had planned, occur in the nighttime and potentially occur maybe every few days, but it will always occur at nighttime. And the whole point was that monsters would eventually break out the dungeon. You would have to have maybe some guards, or you would have to try and stop them, have NPCs try and fight them, and if NPCs die while fighting them, then you'd lose a lot of happiness. You would maybe use more water or more food or things like that, and they'll also potentially destroy buildings. Obviously I ran out of time and didn't get to do that, but I'm hoping to be able to do something like that this time. The next thing is that I want to talk about the idea of disasters. So monster raids was the one that I initially had planned for night times, but another disaster that was planned was something to do with water. Of course, it didn't really work for 2D games, but with a 3D game I should be able to raise and lower the water and have it affect the environment in a lot more effective way. So essentially I wanted to have different levels of how the water would affect the landscape. The first obviously being the fact that no one would arrive on the island. The second level would affect any buildings that are built on this main first section, and all islands will be starting at this level. At least that's what I've decided so far, but they will lead to high levels of land, so levels that where landscape is much higher or the same. This is going to be important because you might want to place your most important buildings on a higher on landscape that's much higher from the water level. And of course you could have your lower level ones or buildings that don't get as damaged by oceans on the lower one. The next thing is that what you want to do is the final one, the final level of the ocean. It is one that's going to actually destroy some buildings. It won't destroy dungeons, but it might completely destroy farms and wells specifically. And it will also drain your water completely, because obviously salt water completely ruins in real life, farms are one of the biggest damages of tsunamis is actually farmland, because it becomes contaminated by salt water. And so this is something I really want to bring into this. So those are just two of the examples of disasters I want to try and bring in. I want to do a couple more, but at the moment I'm just going to stick to those two. The next thing is to be able to build bridges. I mentioned it earlier, and coming back to it, I want to be able to build, for the player to be able to build over the water to other islands, to be able to expand to them. The final thing is better monster / XP system. So I want the monsters to be a lot more dangerous and a little bit more smarter. I want them to chase you around. I want them to be a little bit better in terms of their AI, but more specifically I want there to be an XP system, so a progress for the player to slowly level up that's associated with an individual character. This way I can also determine what level monsters will spawn, as opposed to what they are now. At the moment, monsters will spawn to the level of a specific dungeon type, so if it's small, medium or large. I want to change that so that monsters will be associated with your player's level instead. That way you can't just cheat the system and make a tiny dungeon and then expect to get really powerful leveled monsters. The other thing is I don't like the idea of players being able to place the spawners and place the monsters all that much. It was one of the big feedbacks I got, is that it was just so easily predictable, because not only do you build the dungeons, but you also build, you know, where the monsters spawn and how they spawn, and it really made it pretty boring. There wasn't really much variation, especially when you're creating the dungeon itself. So that is everything for Dungeon Architect. This is going to be a somewhat of a big project, but everything is already here. Everything is laid down, ready to be done. It's something that's relatively straightforward, because all of the coding is more or less complete for the heavy, more difficult stuff. Obviously, my game is starting to see a lot more frame drops. This is, again, because there's no optimization with the code. And that is another thing that I'll be working on with this game, is a ton of optimization. But that is everything. So keep staying tuned for this development. Hopefully the next video will be about some of the improvements to rotating buildings, hopefully completed prefabs, a little bit more building, and building bridges and things. Hopefully will be done for next week, or the week after, depending on when I've recorded. So with that in mind, stay tuned, and hopefully we can make this game a big success. So this has been ProTaleDev, and I'll see you next time.